Okay, Boker Tov, everybody. We will now learn a new Mishnah. And when I say a new Mishnah, it's not really new because we did study it. Part of it we studied very much Be'iyun because it had to do with previous sugyas. Okay, as happens. So it's a Mishnah and a short Gemara on it. Let's go for it. It's Daf Dalet Amud Beis. There are two Mishnah. It's like 2/3 from the top. 2/3, between 2/3 and half from the top. Okay? Dalet Amud Bet. There are two Mishnayos in Dalet Amud Bet. I'm talking about the upper one. Okay? The Mishnah goes, Horu Beidin v'yada echad mehen shetau. Okay? Beidin rules, and one of them ruled, and one of them knew that they're mistaken, that they're erroneous. Darren, you have the spot?
Yes.
No, don't. It's okay. We have time. Just Dalet Amud Bet.
It's the second Mishnah in Bet.
No. There are two Mishnah. It's the first one.
No, the first one. Okay.
Read it. Read
the narrow section.
Yeah. You know what, Darren? Can you just say the first sentence of that Mishnah? That way, I'll know that you're in the right spot.
Sure. The Mishnah continues with the laws of communal error bull. If the court ruled erroneously and one of the court members realized they had
Very
erred.
good. Okay, that's it. You're in the right spot. You're in the right spot. Very good. Okay. So Horu Beidin, I'm reading. Beseder?
Yes.
Horu Beidin ruled. V'yada echad mehem sheta. When one of the members of the Sanhedrin knows that they're erroneous. Now he wasn't silent. He wasn't shy. Amar lahen. Toinatem, you guys are wrong. All right, he told them that. So that's one case. And then they, I guess, the Mishnah doesn't say what happened, but they issued the erroneous ruling, meaning they said, let's say, to violate Shabbos or to eat an unkosher item, the chalev, the fat, regarding something that is a kares. Look, there are 71 people, right? There's 71 people. He's one. Okay, so 70 versus 1. Netanyahu can only dream about such a majority. Okay, so Horu, he's working on it. You know, when it's going to be a dictatorship. Yeah, of course not. I'm just read too many. I read too many articles in Haaretz. I started believing them. Okay, Horu Beidin, v'yada echad mehen sheta'u. And one of them is aware that they're mistaken, and they didn't listen to him. Now, look, we would have thought that such a case, they will be obligated to bring a bull because we know that there is a majority ruling in all the Torah. So the ruling is valid in that sense, and it was erroneous. So they need to bring a public bull. So how surprising it is that our Mishnah, as you'll see, I do the spoiler, this is one of the cases that the Mishnah says that there is no bull brought. All right? Now, this is exactly the case that we already discussed, because this Mishnah seemed to contradict a previous sugya in the previous daf. Because if you remember, refresh your memory, there was an Amora called Rabbi Yonasan. Rabbi Yonasan, in Gimel Amud Bet, the previous daf, 2 pages behind, Rabbi Yonasan said 2 innovations. A, that there could be a Sanhedrin that they're ruling when they have 100 judges, meaning that one can add more than the 71. And he says, even if all the 100 ruled, but if it's not unanimous, no bull is brought. Rabbi Yonatan said that. Rabbi Yonatan required, here, I'll just, you don't need to open it up. I'll just quote it. Rabbi Yonatan says, Amar Rabbi Yonatan, it's the second line in Gimel Amud Bet. Amar Rabbi Yonatan, me yashiyashvu lehorot, 100 judges that sat down to issue a halachic ruling. They're not obligated to bring a bull until they will all unanimously make that ruling. Shenemar ve'im kol adat Yisrael yishgu. Yeah, the parsha of public bull, it says kol adat Yisrael yishgu, all the people of Israel. And we saw that the people of Israel here refers to Beit Din that represent the people of Israel. If all the people of Israel will make an error, will err, so the requirement is that all of them will make the error. That's Rabbi Yonasan. Therefore, Rabbi Yonasan says, A, there is a possibility for 100 people sitting as a Beit Din and issuing a ruling. That's one innovation. That is not trivial. But the focus of the previous sugya of the 2 pages ago was that he required a unanimous ruling for a public bull. Okay? And that was very surprising because we know in all the Torah Kula, it's rubo kechulo. Yeah, the minute that there is a majority, then it's considered like, oh, especially regarding Beit Din. We know that Beit Din, that's the practice. All right? So that was, and indeed, and here is the point, that was Rabbi Yonasan's opinion, the requirement for unanimous ruling. By the way, Gabe, I pronounce it correct? Unanimous? How do Americans pronounce it?
Correct.
Yeah, unanimous? Okay. So the thing is that, what's the problem? The problem is that the shot of the sugya there was a discussion like half a page or more about Rabbi Yonasan's opinion. And if you remember, there were refutations and a discussion regarding his opinion. And it seemed, the pshat of the sugya seemed to conclude against him. Meaning that in order to bring a public bull, you don't need unanimous ruling. That what seemed to be the pshat conclusion of the sugya. All right? Now, the problem is, as you see, that Dafka, this Mishnah, seems to follow Rabbi Yonasan, right? Because the Mishnah says that if one of them knew that they're mistaken, then there is no public bull. All right, so we discussed that thoroughly. I won't repeat the share we gave on this, but I tried to reconcile, if you remember, the previous sugya and this Mishnah, meaning how come the previous sugya seems to conclude against Rabbi Yonasan, and this Mishnah seems to dafka follow Rabbi Yonasan. I'll return to that. I'll mention maybe briefly what we said, but I won't open the whole discussion again, of course. Okay, so that was the first example for this Mishnah. I'll just say the topic of the Mishnah. The topic of the Mishnah is the list of disqualifications for bringing a bull. So the first one was that if one knew that they erred, and not only that he knew that they erred, he spoke up and said it to them, okay? If this happened, no bull is brought for some reason, okay? Let's continue the next case in the Mishnah. So I'm reading again. Beit Din issued a ruling, an erroneous ruling, and one of them knew that they're erroneous, that they're erring. By the way, is that the way you say that they're erring? No, that's probably not proper.
They erred.
Erred.
Like air. They erred.
One of them knows that knows that they erred, and he tells them that. That's the first case. Oh, or next line. Oh, shelo haya mufla shel Beit Din sham. That's very interesting. Meaning, mufla. What is the word mufla? What does it mean, mufla?
Distinguished.
Very good. How does Rabbi Art Scroll translate? Distinguished, I think, is a great translation here in the context.
It says here, yeah, or if the most distinguished member of the court was not present.
Fantastic. That's exactly the point. Gabe, you could, Gabe, I think
Yes.
I think I'm calling Art Scrolls to hire you. because you're,
I was actually reading Steinsaltz.
so that great minds think alike, Steinsaltz and Schuttenstein. Okay,
Yep.
so yeah, most distinguished. Now, I want to, excuse me for the little Hebrew class, but I think it's interesting. I'm influenced, I read this morning, Gabe knows that, because at the end of the minyan, I try, when I'm able, to say it Var Torah at the end of the regular Shachris. I'm trying to say it Var Torah from the portion of that day. Like today is Shishi. Now, the first verse or second verse in Shishi of Kitisa says, Vayomer Hashem, God tells Moses after the golden calf and after he reveals himself with the 13 attributes of mercy. Okay. I encourage all of you to hear my great video this Shabbat that I send you 7:36 a.m. or something like that before Shacharis. It's about the connection between the golden calf and Paraduma and its relevance for the pandemic. At any rate, I'm saying that the first verse, okay, says that Moshe, that Hashem tells Moshe after he reveals himself with the 13 attributes of mercy, etc. Hinei anochi koret brit. Behold, I am now making a covenant with the people of Israel. Neged kol amcha e'eseh niflaot. Okay? Asher lo nivra'u b'chol haaretz u'b'chol hagoyim. It's the laning of the Tainus Tzibur. Yeah? He says, Re'eh anochi koret brit. Behold, I am now making a covenant. Morning Zish, morning Daniel. Neged kol amcha e'eseh niflaot. I will do, now I'm translating myself, wonderful things to your nation. That's the pshat. But what does Rashi says? That's why I'm mentioning it. That e'eseh niflaot, I will do to your nation, says Hashem to Moses. Niflaot. Niflaot, Rashi says, it's from the word distinguished. That your nation, the people of Israel will be niflaot, as opposed to the goyim. I'm doing a covenant with your people, and they will be niflaot, meaning they will be aside, they will be distinguished from the rest of humanity. Okay? So, and he says that niflaot means distinguished. Mamish in our, look, in the Shishi of the Parsha, that's how Rashi goes, which is not mamash the pshat. Yeah, the pshat there, niflaot, means I'll do miracles. And Rashi goes with the direction, niflaot meaning that I will bring my divine presence, my shechina, I will dwell them. I will dwell with my divine presence, dafka on the people of Israel. By the way, it's the depth of the pshat. I regret that I said that it's not pshat, because the whole topic, the whole context is that the people of Israel betrayed Hashem and sinned. And then there is a renewal of a contract via the certain attributes of mercy. And then Hashem tells Moshe, yes, I will dwell and I will put my divine presence, my shechina dafka on the people of Israel. Neged kol amcha e'eseh niflaot. Asher lo nivra'u b'chol haaretz u'b'chol hagoyim, that were not created to the rest of the world and to the goyim. So the word niflaot, meaning that I will dafka bring my divine presence dafka to the people of Israel. That's how Rashi interprets there the word niflaot. So, and he explains the word niflaot means that it's distinguished. And that's exactly the usage of this terminology here by the sages. Yeah, in our Mishnah, mufla shebei din, the most distinguished member in Beit Din. So if he is not present when this erroneous ruling is issued, then no public bull is brought. Again, explanations later. But that's what it says here. So the first case where there is a disqualification to bring a public bull is when one of the members is saying, you guys are wrong, and they ignore him, apparently. Second case is that the ruling was done without the presence of the most distinguished member of the Sanhedrin. Now it's interesting. Who is the most distinguished? Was there an assigned person who was
there a head?
Yeah. So it's a good question. This concept of mufla shel beidin, is it a halachic concept? Do we see it in other places? Okay, we'll discuss that. So just to illustrate the point, if this is not something that is institutionalized, this most distinguished, then, it reminds me our discussions, as yeshiva high school people, when Haredi people were trying to convince us not to go to the army, but rather to go to a holy yeshiva, as they call it. Because the Hester yeshivot are not holy yeshivot, only the yeshivot that are makpid not to do army, they're the holy yeshivot. So they're not contaminated by the army. So they remain holy. So so of course I was also, people spent effort to convince me as a person who loved Gemara, etc., to just continue to a holy yeshiva and become Haredi. And of course, some of the claims were that the Gedolei Hador, that's what they say. So I would say, but I have my rabbis, Nebuch, the religious Zionist rabbis, that are saying differently. And then, of course, the discussion became, who is the Gedolei Hador? Now here it's very interesting. What I understood from the people there is that we can't really decide on anything. We need to listen to the Gedolei Hador regarding anything, regarding what to vote for, regarding anything. But the most important decision to define who is the Gedolei Hador, that is left to me. What is the criteria to decide who is the Gedolei Hador? Like, they said that one person was Gedolei Hador, and I said that another person is Gedolei Hador. How can we decide? Is there any institutionalized system? Now I'm serious. Yeah, I was half joking, but I'm serious. Nowadays, is there any procedure to define who is the Gedolei Hador, the biggest rabbi in Israel now, let's say, or the biggest rabbi in the world now? Is there any system to decide that? Of course, the answer is no. So then it's left that the most of Yahadut HaTorah say that today, let's say Rabbi Edelstein or Rabbi Kanievsky are the Gedolim, but the Peleg Yerushalmi, they claim that Reb Shmuel Auerbach. If you remember when there was the dispute between Rav Steinman and Rabbi Shmuel Auerbach, so who defines who is the Gedolei Hador? The little man. He needs to decide whether he belongs to the Peleg. So the most critical decision was left. That was very, I found it as a paradox, as an interesting paradox. Yeah. But at any rate, why am I mentioning that? Because just like today, we don't have a system to define who is the Gedolei Hador. I'm asking here, and the source doesn't say, what was the system? What was the basis? What was the system? Was there? Not what was there an institutionalized procedure, a bureaucratic procedure to define who is the mufla of beidin? Because if there is no way to decide who is the most distinguished member of beidin, well, just imagine the 71 rabbis that are the biggest Talmidei Chachamim in Israel. Do you really think that they can reach an agreement who is the one most distinguished? I assume there were at least 5 candidates and that the decision was hard between them. Okay? All right. Enough for that. So at any rate, this most distinguished member of beidin is absent, or that one of them was a convert, meaning one of the members of the court was a convert, then no public bull is brought. Or that one of them was a mamzer, okay? Or that one of them was a nasin. What is a nasin? Natin. What is a natin, Chevron?
It says here, one of the descendants of the Hivite inhabitants of the city of Gibeon in Eretz Israel.
Right.
At the time of Joshua's conquest of the land, they deceived Joshua into allowing them to convert to Judaism. Having sworn to accept them, Joshua did not repudiate their conversion, but instead relegated them to be wood choppers and wood carriers.
Right. Exactly. Meaning couldn't have been said better. The thing is that as you see now, there's a whole list. After the two first cases that one claimed against them, argued against them, you guys are wrong, and they ignored him. And the second case in the Mishnah was that the most distinguished member of Beit Sanhedrin was not there, was absent. Now there's a whole list of disqualifications to bring a bull based on the fact that there were some disqualified members in terms of their personal status that doesn't allow them to be members of Beit Din. Yeah, a convert apparently, we'll discuss Shmaya and Avtalion, but a convert apparently, it seems that he can't be a member of the Sanhedrin. A mamzer cannot be. A natin, this descendant of the Givonites, yeah? Again, he has a personal status that disables him to be a member of the great Supreme Court. Oh, the last one, Zaken Shalora Banim. That's interesting. An old man that cannot have children. What do we mean by cannot have children? What do we mean by cannot have children? Because I don't know if it's because he's too old. Let's see. One second.
This one said unfit to father.
Right. What is Eino Ra'ui Lebanim? Cannot have any more children, even though he had one? I think that he never had children. That's what, what?
There's a note in my Steinsaltz edition that in many sources there is a variant reading that divides this passage in two, teaching that an old man and an individual incapable of fathering children are both disqualified from serving as a Jew.
But when you say, no, but that's great. But when you say old man, how old? I mean, Dafka, we would assume that if we have a judge that is 100 years old, but he's totally cognitive, that will be the best Sanhedrin. Right. So, look, I'll answer you that, but at any rate.
But by the way, Rabbi?
Yes, please.
This says here that a convert, mamzer, and a senior elder unfit to father children are disqualified to serve as judges for capital crimes. Doesn't say they're disqualified, period. This is capital crimes. And this.
Okay. And now, thank you. But if you're already there, you have a Schuttenstein, Darren. Do you have a Schuttenstein? Yes. So how does he translate Zaken Sheino Ra'ui Lebanim? Just tell us that.
It says an elder who is unfit to father children.
Okay, so listen to that. Unfit to father children.
This will be elaborated in our notes to the Gemara. So I don't know where the other part would be.
Unfit to father children means that that he's now can't really treat them, right? Do I understand the English correctly?
Unfit could, I first thought is unfit to father them, like he was not a.
Darren, you got frozen. Can you
more than one thing?
No, Darren, we didn't hear you. Repeat the sentence.
I first thought it meant that he wasn't a good parent, right? Because a parent, fathers the children physically, but it's also a verb, like you need to father your kids.
That's like how I understood it.
Yes.
But
not a good parent. That's what I had.
Right. And then what you thought, that's initially, and then what you thought later.
Well, based on what you said, man, maybe he's like physically unable to father kids, but how would one know that if his wife is dead?
I'll tell you, the term in Hebrew is, in the commentaries, is Eino Ra'ui Lebanim. which is more to the direction, it's, okay, so there's an ambiguity here.
Correct. But again, if someone's physically unable to father children, how would you know? If a man is 55 and then his wife is 55, so they're not going to have kids, but he can for sure have kids with another woman. So he's able
Right.
to do physically. So it would be very unusual to say, oh, he can't father. He's physically unable to. Like there's
No, so we won't say
men
in such
80
a
who
case.
give birth who
We won't say
father
in
kids.
such a case. We won't say in such a case that Zish, did you want to say something?
Actually, I have a Mesivta Gemara in front
Okay.
of me. And
I
he says
also
that
have.
the Mesivta?
No,
Yeah.
I have a different one, and but go ahead, Zish, go ahead.
No, but he says the whole reason is not whether one can be, what his sexual prowess is, but rather a person who doesn't have children, who never had children, who knows what, doesn't have the rachamim for human
Right.
beings, and might not be generous enough thinking of the defendant.
So listen to that, Chevre, I did hear a little spoiler, but what Zish quoted is the Perush of Maimonides in Perush HaMishnayos. Okay? Maimonides, in his commentary to the Mishnah, goes in this direction, that it's someone that is unfit to father, and therefore he doesn't have the mercy, etc. Okay? This is, again, look at Rashi here. Please do that. O zaken she'ein rawi labanim. Look at Rashi in the right hand. V'kashali, did you all find the Rashi? Dibur matchel o zaken she'ein rawi labanim. Rashi says v'kashali mipnei ma ein rawi lahora. Rashi is openly telling us that he doesn't understand this Mishnah. He says, I don't understand why someone who doesn't have children or can a parent, why he is not rawi lahora, why he is not qualified to issue a ruling. Okay? So Rashi doesn't know the reason. Maimonides offers the reason that we said. Okay? But you indeed see that Rashi didn't ask that about the convert or about a mamzer. These are known halachos. Zaken she'eino rawi labanim was an innovation of this Mishnah. And Rashi says, I don't understand it. Maimonides offers, it's exactly what Zish said, that it's, he doesn't have, since he doesn't know what it means to love children, then he might be considered too cruel. Okay, let's continue. Hareze, I'm continuing the Mishnah. Hareze patur. This, meaning all of these cases, all of this list, no public bull is brought. Sheneimar, I'm reading the Mishnah. Sheneimar kaneda, uneimar lehalan eida. It's written here it means in Vayikra, in the paragraph about public bull. Okay, in Parsha, yeah, in the paragraph about public bull. So it's written here, Ve'im kol adat Yisrael yishgu. If all the people, the Eidah, all the people of Israel will make an error. Ne'emar kan Eidah, u'ne'emar lehalan Eidah. It's written regarding Dinei Nefashos, yeah, regarding Dinei Nefashos, it's written, Veshaftu ha'edah, vehitzilu ha'edah. Yeah, the same terminology is written regarding Sanhedrin, regarding capital punishments. Okay? Veshaftu ha'edah, vehitzilu ha'edah, vehitzilu ha'edah. So you have the same terminology, edah. Ma edah amura le'alan kulan ruin lahora. Just as what's written regarding Sanhedrin judging in capital punishment, you need all of them to fulfill the requirements, to be appropriate, to be kosher for issuing a ruling. Ruin qualified lehora, ruin lehora'ah. Af Eda Murakan, so the Eda, the Sanhedrin that is written in the context of the public bull, Also, there is a requirement that all of them will be qualified for ruling. So we see here that in order to be obligated to bring a public bull, we need that all the 71 members of the Sanhedrin that were involved in issuing the erroneous ruling, of course, they should all be qualified members of Sanhedrin. Now, I must say that that makes sense. Because if one of the members was not qualified to be a member of Sanhedrin, then the whole basis of a public bull, a chatas, a sin offering, a public sin offering, that is a public sin of Am Yisrael. Remember, not just a sin of a majority of the individuals as individuals. You're right? If I have 5 million individuals that are making the same mistake, let's say they were all mixed up with the packages. You know what? The factory wrapped the chalev, the non-kosher fat, inadvertently with the package of the kosher fat, okay? So, and then it happened that 5 million Jews, Nebuch, in Israel, excuse me, I need to. Hello, Ima? אני באמצע שיעור גמרא ואין פה אף אחד, אני להתראות בהם. Yeah, that was my mother, so you understand that this is, I had a chiyuv. Very rare. And now, not rare that she calls, I mean rare that in the middle of the, at any rate, what I'm explaining is the following. We explained, I'm again clarifying the distinction between an error that is made by even perhaps the majority of the people of Israel, but yet still it's defined qualitatively as an individual error. Just many individuals made the error. That's the example of a package that the factory made a mistake with a package. And then maybe, you know what, all of the people of Israel made that mistake. It will still not be defined qualitatively as a public error that a bull is brought for. Rather, there'll be tons of individual sin offerings that will be brought.
Because was it based on a ruling? It was based on like a mislabeling of a factory?
Right. What defines the error as public in nature, in essence, is the fact that the basis for the error was an erroneous ruling of the central institution that represents the entire people of Israel.
Mhm.
Now, what happened if one of the judges is not qualified? The erroneous ruling is issued by 71 judges, but one of them, at least one of them, is not a qualified judge. Then the institution didn't represent the people of Israel, meaning that chain didn't work, meaning because it wasn't a ruling, or either you say it didn't represent, but what I mean, it wasn't a valid ruling of the central institution. It wasn't a valid ruling because one of the members was disqualified. So it wasn't a valid member. It didn't have the validity of a ruling of the central institution. And therefore, it's no more considered as a public error. Okay? Because in the algorithm, right? In the Tarshim Zrima, the flow chart, I don't know how you call it, one component didn't work. That is, there wasn't a valid ruling. The mistake was not based on a valid ruling of the central institution. So no public bull is brought. So the logic of this Mishnah is very clear, I think. very clear. Now, the details, they could be challenging. What do I mean by that? Because indeed, some of the examples in the Mishnah are fitting well the criteria the Mishnah brings. The mamzer, the natin, the convert. However, lo haya, the mufla of Beit Din was not present. Okay, so he wasn't present. The most distinguished member of Beit Din was not present. Yet still there were 71, apparently 71 valid members there. So what's the problem? Or even if there is a problem, it doesn't seem that the problem is the same one that the Mishnah at the end, Hareze Patur Shenemar. Now, the answer to that, perhaps, Hareze Patur Shenemar, that says in the Mishnah, you could tell me, and maybe that's the truth, who said that that explanation is referring to all the examples of the Mishnah? Perhaps this Shenemar, Ne'emar Kan Ida v'Ne'emar Lehalan Ida, perhaps it is referring only to the last examples and not to the first two. The first two, one that said to them, you guys are wrong, and they ignored him. And the second example of the Mishnah, that the most distinguished member was absent, maybe they have a different explanation why no bull is brought. Maybe the Hareze Patur Shenemar, maybe the Shenemar explains only the last examples. Okay? Though I must say it's a little hard, but just a little. Because it's very hard to say that if one of the members claimed you guys are wrong and they ignored him, how is that defining that they're not Ra'uyin Lahora? So, okay, let's read all the Rashis on the Mishnah, and then still another question is, why do I need the Gzeira Shava from Sanhedrin who are judging capital crime, capital punishment? That I need all of them to be qualified to issue a ruling. I mean, of course I need all of them to be qualified to issue a ruling. Why do I need to learn that from there? That's another question. Or it's a simple svara that you can't have. Why will a public bull be brought if one of the members of the Sanhedrin turned out that he wasn't qualified to issue a ruling? Let's read now all the Rashis. Rashi in Masnitin. Ve'amar lahem toim atem. You see that? Everyone sees the first Rashi on the Mishnah. Ve'amar lahem toim atem. Lo habe hora ma'alya ufator. It is not a good enough, a perfect ruling, and therefore there is no bull brought. Deba'inan ad sheyoru kulan kedamar le'il. We discussed this Rashi thoroughly. This Rashi, we read it. Because Rashi here, without even being embarrassed, he says that the pshat of the Mishnah is like Rabbi Yonasan, which the previous sugya rejected. Because he says, why it's not a good ruling? Because we require that the ruling will be unanimous. But we saw that the conclusion of the previous daf was exactly the opposite. So Rashi here says, no, I interpret the pshat of the Mishnah. The pshat of the Mishnah is indeed that no bull is brought if there is no unanimous ruling. That's the pshat of Rashi. And Tosfot are indeed asking, it seems indeed against the pshat. Okay? What we offered, I'll just say, first of all, you see that Rashi doesn't say that the reason why here there's no bull brought is because lo re'uyin lahora, like the reason the Mishnah gives at the end. just says it's not a good ruling. It's not a valid ruling because it's not unanimous. It's not a valid ruling to bring a bull, for bringing a bull, because you need a unanimous ruling. So first of all, when I told you that the reason the Mishnah gives at the end for why now no bull is brought, that you need that that all of them will be qualified to give a ruling, that doesn't apply to the first case in the Mishnah. The reason for no bull, for the exemption from bull at the first case is a different one. So Rashi goes in that direction. He gives a different reason, that this is according to the opinion that in order for ruling to be a potential for public bull, you need that it will be unanimous ruling. Okay? I'm just saying what I tried to say in reconciliation of the sugyas, if you remember, is to say that perhaps this is here, Rabbi Yonatan there went a little too far, because he said that you mamish need a unanimous ruling. However, the Mishnah here talks about an extreme case that one told them, you guys are wrong, and they ignored him. Now, perhaps in such a case that he said you're wrong and they ignored him, so I said, either it defines them as not qualified for hurrah, and then it fits with the last explanation that is brought in the Mishnah, meaning when you ignore with no basis someone that tells you explicitly you guys are wrong, that already turns the Beit to be not qualified to ruling, and then it fits the explanation also in the Mishnah. But that seems a big innovation. Perhaps you could say something more moderate, and maybe even stretch it into Rashi. Perhaps Rashi says Rabbi Yonatan's concept is wrong, though the way Rabbi Yonatan implements it, this is what was rejected in the previous sugya. Meaning, I need that the Sanhedrin, for a public bull, I need that they will represent the people of Israel. In order, not only in their task, you remember that we mentioned Rav Soloveitchik's vort, that the Sanhedrin has two hats. Transmitting the Torah Shebal Peh and establishing it and legislating it, etc., and judging. And the second thing, they have some ceremonial, as I said, ceremonial role in sanctifying the new moon, in appointing a king, all kinds of stuff. They are considered, the Sanhedrin, as the representatives of the people of Israel. Now, I discussed with you, what hat are they wearing when we discuss the public bull? Here, clearly, I think they wear both hats, because they're issuing a ruling, but also they need to represent the people of Israel in order to define it as a public error. By the way, this thing is controversial. One could have said no. I think Rav Soloveitchik himself, maybe he said no. It's enough. They're not even if they're not wearing their ceremonial hat here, the very reason, the very fact that the central court of Israel, based on majority ruling, issued a ruling, that is already enough to define this as a public error when most of the people of Israel follow it. They're not really wearing their ceremonial hat as let's say, like the way they appoint the king. But one definitely can claim that, yes, in order to define it as a public error, I see them also as acting, as functioning in their ceremonial hat. Now, once you say that, perhaps that's what I claimed in my svara, you require a unanimous ruling in order for it to be the halacha of majority ruling is regarding deciding laws and judging. But maybe as a ceremony, as representatives, maybe you need a unanimous ruling. That's part of this. Now, That perhaps was Rabbi Yonasan's opinion. Now, those who disagree with him, maybe they disagree with the entire concept, but perhaps they're saying, I agree with the concept, only I think Rabbi Yonatan in the details went too far. Meaning, if there is a majority ruling because one is silent, or one, or there was a discussion, meaning he claimed you guys are wrong, but there was a discussion. Maybe he wasn't convinced, but there was a discussion. Maybe in such a case, I can see, I applied the concept of bittul, meaning when I have a majority in a mixture, let's say I have a kosher mixture, a kosher food, and I have a minority of non-kosher that was dropped into that mixture, then we know that we have, under some conditions, the concept of bittul. Yeah, that I see the identity of the entire mixture as kosher, and the non-kosher minority was canceled. Okay? Now I could see the same thing in the Sanhedrin. If I have a minority, let's say I have 69 judges saying one thing and 2 judges against them, well, I could see it now as a court of 71 saying that ruling. Now, however, the case of our Mishnah, this can't happen. That's what I claimed. Because in the case of our Mishnah, he claimed you guys are wrong. And they ignored it, so he can't be canceled. It's like when you have a non-kosher slice within a majority kosher mixture, and that non-kosher slice is distinguished, and therefore it cannot be seen as part of the entire mixture as a whole and giving an identity to the whole, including it. It can't be canceled. My point was that when this judge is saying you guys are wrong, meaning there's a difference between someone that disagrees but he's silent and someone that disagrees and he says you guys are wrong. And therefore I think that our Mishnah was very bediktuk, that it said you guys are wrong. Here, you can't bring a public bull because they don't represent the people of Israel, because it's not unanimous. And Rabbi Yonatan, he went a step further in the previous daf. He said that even when one judge is silent, it's no good. All right? This is what the Gemara rejected there, according to Rashi. The Gemara said, no, rubo kechulo. Yeah, that's what the Gemara there said. Rubo kechulo. When there's a majority, it's like the whole. The Mishnah required, the Gemara 2 pages ago required that it will be rubo kechulo. It will be all the Sanhedrin. Only the minority is canceled by the majority. However, the case in our Mishnah, Rashi says, ad sheyoru kulan. You need tachlis that the end result will be kulo, and when one claims tolinatem, that can't happen. That was my attempt to explain the sugyas. Let's continue the Rashi. O shalo haya mufla shel beidin sham. Or that the most distinguished member of the Sanhedrin was not there. Rashi says, Afal gav de lo havim Sanhedrin atzman. Rashi stresses that this, look at the case, that this most distinguished member of the court was not there, even though he was not part of the 71. If he's one of the 71 judges, even if the most minor judge there was absent, it would have been considered a good ruling. There is a requirement in kol adat Yisrael, all the members of Sanhedrin, then obviously you need that all the members will be present. If the court was lacking one of the member, it's a disqualified ruling and no public bull is brought. So Rashi says, it says that if the most distinguished member was not there, what do you mean the most distinguished? Even if the most minor member was not there, it's a disqualified ruling. Consequently, Rashi says the Mishnah here means that there were 71 judges. For some reason, the most distinguished Sanhedrin rabbi was not part of the quorum of the 71. He still needs to be there as a mentor, as a leader. And if he's not there, no bull is brought. The Rashi clarifies this. So now Rashi wants to explain the scenario. How come this happened, this weird scenario? Where 71 members signed on the most distinguished judge. Why wasn't he part of the 71? Rashi needs to explain how this happened. Yeah. Inami zaken she'en lo banim haya. Lakach nitmana acher b'Sanhedrin. How did this happen? He said either one member had to go, and therefore they appointed a 72nd member, okay? And that's how it happened that there were 71 members aside from the most distinguished member. And another scenario is perhaps this most distinguished member, most learned one, didn't have children. And since he didn't have children, he couldn't be an effective judge, but he was the most learned and the most qualified guy. And that's how there were 71, and he also. And then it says that if he's not there as the 72nd, not 72nd that votes, just present. If he's not there, then the ruling is not valid then there won't be bull. A bull will not be brought. In order for the bull to be brought, you need his presence there. Now, this is an interesting ruling because according to the way Rashi explains it, and it makes sense because as Rashi says, if he's just not there and he's one of the 71, then the ruling is not valid because there is no quorum of 71. But the thing is that now clearly the reason for the exemption from the bull cannot be the reason brought at the end of the Mishnah. That they're not, because here, when he's not there, still all the 71, there were 71 people who were qualified to be members of Sanhedrin, and they issued a ruling. So why isn't the bull brought? The reason brought at the end of the Mishnah that I need kol ha'edah, kulan ru'in lo does not apply to this case. That's for sure. So we'll need to explain what's the reason for that. Okay, let's continue the Rashi till the end of the Mishnah. Oh, zaken she'ein ra'oi labanim, we read that already. Kasha li mipnei ma ein ra'oi lehora. It's not clear to Rashi why an old man that doesn't have children, but is a very well-learned person, why he is not qualified to a ruling. V'ne'emar lehalan eidah, v'shaftu ha'eidah v'hitzilu ha'eidah in Bamidbar, da'ainu Sanhedrin. Yeah, v'shaftu ha'eidah v'hitzilu ha'eidah in Bamidbar lamed hey. It's the context of a capital punishment. Ne'emar kan eidah d'chtiv in vayikra im kol adat Yisrael yishgu. And it says there, I'll return to this thing. Okay, so this is the Rashi on the Mishnah. Now, let's read just the first lines of the Gemara and then we'll end the shir. Look at the Gemara. Or perhaps because that's the second case of the Mishnah, or perhaps that the most qualified member, most distinguished member of the Sanhedrin was not there. And I said that the explanation brought at the end of the Mishnah cannot apply to this case. So the Gemara seems to agree with me, because the Gemara asks Manalan, if indeed the reason the Mishnah brings for the mamzer and the natin and the convert would have been applicable to this case, then the Gemara wouldn't ask Manalan. From how do we know, though no, that's not a proof. Perhaps you'll say Manalan, how do we know that this is considered not qualified? But okay, I don't think Manalan, Amar Rav Sheshes, V'chen Tane Divrei Rabbi Yishmael, Mipnei ma amru horu bedavar shatzdokin modim bo pturin. What was the reason that we said that there no public bull is brought if the ruling, the error was regarding something that even the tzdokim agree with the right halacha? There was such a fundamental mistake, apparent mistake. As the Gemara said, Zil Kari Birav, every kid knows that that's the halacha, because even the tzdokim concede that this is the right halacha. So how do we know that one that makes a mistake regarding such an easy law that even the tzdokim admit, how do we know that there's no bull brought? Because this is such a trivial thing that they should have learned better and they didn't learn. So therefore they can't have an atonement of bringing a bull. As Gabe explained, I think, back then, and others, it's like close to mazid, or David Goodwin. It's like close to mazid. It's a very extreme negligence. More than a shogeg that you get atonement, that the Sanhedrin get atonement, because this is such a trivial mistake. If even the tzdokim agree with it, it's a pshat of the verses. They should have learned that, and they didn't. They can't have atonement with a public bull, the Sanhedrin. Okay? So, no public bull is brought in such a case. And why is that? Because this is such an extreme negligence. They should have learned, and they didn't. Lo haya mufla shel beidin sham nami pturin. If the most distinguished member was absent there, they're also exempt. Why? The same thing, because they should have learned better and they didn't. Now, you understand that what is this? Is that it? Do they want to say that there's an expectation that they won't go ahead and make a ruling if the most distinguished is not there? I mean, the analogy is not clear. You understand my question? Regarding the tzdokim, I understand the words. Why are they exempt when they make a trivial mistake? Because it's so trivial that we say, they should have learned. It's an extreme negligence, more than a shogeg. Why is ruling when the most distinguished member is not there is also in that status? Maybe yes. How do you feel about it? Is the analogy clear? What is the pshat of the Gemara here? One might say the pshat of the Gemara is yes, indeed. Meaning, if they're so arrogant and they're not humble, and they're, meaning, I'll say it this way. If you are a careful member of Sanhedrin, you won't issue a public ruling regarding Shabbos, Kashrus, if the most distinguished member, you're making now a ruling to all the people of Israel, and you're the Sanhedrin, the central institution. You won't do that if the most distinguished guy is not there. And if you went ahead and did that, that is more than a shogeg. That's extreme negligence. Just like making a trivial mistake that even the tzdokim, like misinterpreting a pshat of a verse in the Torah. That's the analogy. Both of them are extreme negligence. Hayalahem lilmod velo lamdu. Okay? Now the term hayalahem lilmod velo lamdu in terms of Hebrew is fitting more the original context that it was said regarding a mistake that the Sanhedrin, regarding a trivial law. Here, what do you mean they should have learned? It's just, they should have not issued a ruling without the presence of the most distinguished guy, but it's the same idea, okay? They should have asked him to come and learn from him or whatever, but that's the meaning of it, extreme negligence. That seems to be the pshat of the Gemara. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's the way we explain that. Okay, now I'll just end this discussion with one more thing. If you're a member of Lichtenstein offered, he offered that a mistake, that a ruling, an erroneous ruling, that it's a trivial, an extremely trivial mistake, like the case of Tzedkim. Yeah, that they're making a mistake regarding a law that even the Tzedkim agreed regarding the correct law. Since it's such an extreme mistake, such extreme negligence, then Rav Lichtenstein offered that this maybe is not even considered a ruling. That's why no bull is brought. Yeah, when 71 members are saying that there's no Shabbos in the Torah, and here the Tzedkim agree that there is a Shabbos in the Torah, this is so trivial, it's not even a ruling. It's as if they did nothing. Okay, we said that. Now, the question is, since we have here an analogy to that, the absence of a most distinguished member, a ruling issued when the most distinguished member is absent. Will that be considered a ruling and still there is an exemption? Or it's not a ruling even, just like, is it the same? So he wanted to say no. He found it hard to say that when they issue a ruling, members of Sanhedrin, and the only problem is that the most distinguished judge is absent, to say that that's not even, it's not even considered a ruling. It's a ruling, but there's an exemption because they're karov lemezid. Okay. Will we say that it's such a thing that it's not, you can't even call it a ruling if the most distinguished guy is not there? Well, I could see his point. Okay. When they really rule in content, something that is extremely trivial, that it's wrong, that's not even, it's as if they did nothing. However, if they issue a ruling, there are 71 members, only it's extreme negligence, the fact that they did it without the presence of the most distinguished judge, won't say that it's not a ruling. It's a ruling, but no bull could be brought as an atonement because it's extreme negligence. Okay, חברים יקרים, שיהיה לכולם שבת שלום.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom.